Imagine a creature swimming in a totally boiling ocean of sulfuric acid.
Wow, okay. Setting the scene.
Right. And its body is laced with silicon. It breathes absolutely no oxygen. And, well, its biology looks literally nothing like ours.
Yeah, totally alien.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now ask yourself, when that creature looks up at its own strange sky, does it feel awe? Does it, experience the warmth of its star or the fear of a predator? Does it actually have an inner life?
It's just a staggering thought experiment. I mean, it cuts right to the heart of how we understand the entire universe.
Right.
Because for decades, when we've searched the stars, we've just been looking for the physical ingredients we already know, like carbon, liquid water.
The stuff we're made of.
Exactly. The assumption has always been that to feel something, to actually be conscious, you have to be made of the specific meat and chemistry that we are made of.
Right. But today, we're throwing that assumption entirely out the window. We are exploring a brilliant, honestly mind-bending paper. It's titled Substrate Flexibility and the Copernican Principle of Consciousness.
Such a great paper.
It really is. It's by philosophers and astrobiologists Jeremy Pober and Eric Schwitzgebel. And the mission for you, listening right now, is to join us as we figure out, does consciousness actually require Earth-like biology?
Yeah, or could an inner mental life exist in entirely bizarre alien physical forms?
Or even inside artificial intelligence?
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Before we blast off into deep space, we have to ground ourselves in the core concept that really drives this entire conversation.
The foundational stuff, yeah.
Right. The authors keep using this term, substrate flexibility. So what exactly does that mean in this context?
Well, it's all about separating the function of a thing from the actual material it's made out of. So a substrate is just the underlying physical stuff that makes up a specific phenomenon or an object.
Okay, the physical stuff.
Yeah, and the authors use some highly relatable everyday examples to illustrate this. Like, take the concept of a cup. The target phenomenon here is just being a cup, right? An object that holds liquid so you can drink out of it.
Right, makes sense.
The substrate is the material. So you can have a cup made of glass or ceramic or like plastic. And because the phenomenon of a cup can be realized through multiple different materials, we say it is substrate flexible.
But there are limits to that, obviously. Like, I can't hand you a cup made out of air.
Right. No.
The material still has to basically support the physics of holding a liquid.
Precisely. Another example they use, which I love, is a computer hard drive. So the phenomenon is storing digital data.
Okay.
And the substrate could be a solid-state drive. It could be an optical disc like a CD or, magnetic tape. It's highly substrate flexible. But, as the authors helpfully point out, a hard drive cannot be made out of cheese.
Right, because cheese fundamentally lacks the physical mechanism to store binary data. Like, if I could jump in with an analogy here, is it sort of like a recipe where you can swap out certain ingredients, like, say, using applesauce instead of eggs, and you still end up getting a cake?
Yeah, exactly.
Versus a recipe that just fails completely if you try to use something ridiculous like, I don't know, gravel instead of flour.
That is a perfect analogy. The gravel just completely lacks the chemical and structural properties to bake into anything. And that actually leads directly to what Pober and Schwitzgebel are really focused on, which is substantial substrate flexibility.
Okay, substantial. How is that different?
Well, they aren't just wondering if consciousness can happen in a brain that's like 10% larger than a human's or one that folds slightly differently. They're asking if consciousness can arise in entities constructed from entirely different chemical kinds.
Like different atomic building blocks?
Exactly. We are talking about life forms built out of completely different atoms than anything we have ever found on Earth.
But see, that raises an immediate practical problem for me. Before we can even ask if these wildly different non-carbon alien minds exist, we have to know if there are even any alien civilizations out there at all. Like, if the universe is empty, this is a moot point.
Right, and that is where the astrobiological math comes into play. The authors look at the Fermi paradox, the famous question of why we haven't seen anybody else out there yet.
Yeah.
There is everybody.
Exactly. And they use incredibly, almost aggressively conservative cosmological estimates to establish a baseline. Astrobiologists, they regularly estimate the number of technological civilizations that might arise.
Sure.
But Pober and Schwitzgebel, they take a median scientific estimate and then purposely shrink it down to this tiny pessimistic fraction. They say, okay, let's just assume only 1 in a billion galaxies ever produces a technological civilization at some point in its lifetime.
1 in a billion. I mean, that is basically assuming that our entire cosmic neighborhood is utterly barren.
It's about as conservative as you can possibly get, but you have to remember the sheer scale of reality we're talking about here.
Right.
The observable universe contains roughly 1 trillion galaxies. So even with that wildly pessimistic estimate of 1 in a billion, the math still leaves us with at least 1,000 distinct, highly advanced alien species scattered across space and time.
Okay, wait. I'm struggling with this leap a little bit. Wait, how do we know these aliens are actually sophisticated without prematurely assuming they are conscious? I mean, my smartphone solves incredibly complex mathematical problems in milliseconds, but it's completely dark inside.
Yeah, totally.
It doesn't actually experience the math. So aren't we jumping the gun by assuming these 1,000 species matter to a conversation about consciousness?
That is a crucial distinction, and honestly, the authors are very careful not to make that leap prematurely. They do not claim these 1,000 species are conscious yet.
Okay.
They only claim that these species exhibit what they strictly define as behavioral sophistication.
Meaning just what they do on the outside.
Yes, purely an external pattern of behavior. To qualify, a species must demonstrate complex goal-seeking. They must use communication with a generative grammar.
Wait, generative grammar? Like syntax?
Yeah, meaning they can combine distinct signals to create entirely new, totally infinite meanings. And they must engage in remote cooperation, where individuals coordinate for survival across distances without direct physical contact.
Okay, I see. So it's purely about what they do, not what they feel.
Yeah.
Like you physically can't build a massive technological civilization without that base level of behavioral sophistication.
Exactly. We are just establishing the baseline here. The universe practically guarantees the existence of at least 1,000 highly complex, cooperative, problem-solving species.
Okay, so if we accept the math that these 1,000 sophisticated species exist, what are their bodies actually made of? Like, are they walking around in meat suits just like us, utilizing the exact same carbon and water chemistry?
Well, the science they pull into this paper suggests they almost certainly are not.
Really?
Yeah. To understand why, we have to look really closely at how Earth life is built at the atomic level. All life on Earth uses a carbon scaffold. Imagine like a long chain of carbon atoms acting as the structural backbone.
Okay, a backbone.
And attached to that backbone are what chemists call heteroatoms. On Earth, biology primarily relies on oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur as our heteroatoms.
Right, the classic ingredients.
Exactly. And all of this chemical interaction takes place in a solvent, which for us is liquid water.
It just seems so intuitive to us, right?
Yeah.
Carbon, water, oxygen. It's what we breathe, it's what we drink. But the paper points out that this specific recipe is just a microscopic fraction of what the universe is capable of, right?
Oh, absolutely. Even just using the basic elements available everywhere, the universe offers something like 10 to the 54th power possible amino acid alphabets.
Wow. 10 to the 54th. That is, I mean, that's an almost incomprehensible number.
It really is, because Earth life uses exactly 20 amino acids to build every protein, every cell, every single organism.
Just 20.
Just 20. Now, our set of 20 is very good at what it does. You know, the proteins fold well, the energy transfer is highly efficient, but it is highly unlikely to be the only optimal set in existence.
Out of 10 to the 54th possibilities, there are bound to be millions of other perfectly viable amino acid alphabets that can build incredibly complex biological structures.
Precisely.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though. The authors bring up the actual environment of Venus to explain the physical mechanics of this. We usually think of sulfuric acid as this destructive, horrible melting thing, right?
Right, like acid from a sci-fi movie.
Exactly. But if you treat it as a biological solvent instead of water, the rules of chemistry completely flip.
They do. And the mechanism behind it is fascinating. On Earth, water is our universal solvent. It facilitates the breaking and making of bonds for oxygen and nitrogen perfectly. But if a planet's solvent is sulfuric acid-like in the dense gas clouds of Venus, the ionic environment changes entirely.
Okay, so how does that affect the atoms?
Well, in sulfuric acid, the energy cost required for oxygen and nitrogen to form stable chemical bonds becomes prohibitively high. They basically fail as heteroatoms. They just can't do the chemical heavy lifting.
They become the gravel in the cake recipe?
Exactly. But silicon, which reacts terribly in water, it practically falls apart here on Earth, suddenly finds the perfect energetic environment in sulfuric acid. Its available chemical space expands massively, allowing it to form really complex, stable bonds.
So you could literally have an alien biology with a carbon backbone, but using silicon as the heteroatoms, swimming around in a totally sulfuric acid ocean.
Yep.
And what blew my mind is that this isn't just pure science fiction either. The text actually mentions that scientists took a real Earth bacteria, Rhodothermus marinus, and in a lab, they coaxed it into synthesizing silicon-carbon bonds.
Yeah, that experiment is amazing.
They essentially forced Earth biology to prove that it can adapt to incorporate silicon.
It is a stunning proof of biological adaptability. Now, I do want to provide a quick reality check here regarding silicon, just because science fiction often gets this specific thing wrong.
Oh, okay. What did they get wrong?
Well, you frequently hear about entirely silicon-based life, where silicon outright replaces carbon as the main scaffolding of the creature.
Right, like giant rock monsters.
Exactly. But the paper notes, this specific pure silicon setup is practically impossible. The temperatures required for silicon to form long, stable structural chains are cryogenic-like, super, super cold.
Okay.
But the temperatures needed for silicon to actually react dynamically with other elements are incredibly hot.
Right.
So the thermal requirements are mutually exclusive.
Oh, so you can't have both at the same time.
Right. But using silicon as a heteroatom plugged into a carbon chain, functioning inside a sulfuric acid environment, that is biochemically incredibly plausible.
Okay, so if we pull all these threads together, we have mathematically established that the universe is vast enough and chemistry is mechanically flexible enough that strange, non-carbon-based, sulfuric acid-swimming, behaviorally sophisticated aliens are almost certainly out there building things.
Right.
Which brings us to the philosophical climax of the author's argument. Are these creatures actually conscious?
And this is where they apply the Copernican Principle of consciousness. Now, we all know the standard Copernican Principle from astronomy, right?
The idea of mediocrity.
Exactly. The realization that Earth is not the special, privileged center of the physical universe. Pober and Schwitzgebel take that exact logic and apply it to the mind itself.
Right, because if we look at those 1,000 sophisticated alien species, and we assume that our specific random Earth biology, like our exact carbon-water mix, is the only one in the universe that produces an inner life, we are completely violating that principle of mediocrity.
What's fascinating here is how stark the implications become when you really run the numbers. Let's say that out of those 1,000 advanced alien species, only 2% are genuinely conscious.
6%.
Yeah. That means 980 of these species are walking, talking, spaceship-building zombies with absolutely zero inner life. They're doing all the complex math, but it is completely dark inside.
Wow.
If only 2% get to be conscious, and we happen to be one of them, we Earthlings would be suspiciously, inexplicably lucky. We would have won a cosmic lottery that we literally have no right assuming we won.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second, though. Why couldn't we have won that lottery? Could it be that we did just win the lottery, and these silicon sulfuric acid aliens are just highly complex, non-feeling biological robots? Like maybe their strange chemistry just fundamentally lacks the magic spark required for inner experience?
It's a fair challenge, but the authors counter it with a symmetry principle. If you are going to claim that all these highly advanced behaving species are unconscious zombies, there has to be some massive, identifiable, functional deficit you can point to.
Like a broken mechanism.
Yes, you'd have to explain the mechanism. You'd have to say, because they use silicon heteroatoms in acid, their nervous system fundamentally cannot process environmental information as deeply as ours, but there is absolutely no biochemical or evolutionary evidence to support that.
Oh, I see.
There is no physical mechanism that dictates species with different chemical substrates must inevitably suffer a deficit that deprives them of consciousness.
Right. If they are cooperating remotely, building infrastructure, and communicating with generative grammar, their control systems, like whatever serves as their brains, are clearly processing sensory input and abstract information at a massive, intricate scale.
Exactly.
Assuming they don't feel anything just because they don't metabolize oxygen is essentially just arrogance.
Precisely. To assume that our specific meat is the only magical meat capable of experience is what the authors brilliantly term unmotivated terrocentrism, which is just a massive, completely unfounded, Earth-centric bias.
Unmotivated terrocentrism. Man, that is a phrase that sticks with you. Okay, so if consciousness is this incredibly flexible across the cosmos, it immediately makes me wonder about right here on Earth. If we don't need our specific biology, could we just swap out our own brain parts for silicon chips?
Ah, right.
Because this touches on David Chalmers' famous neural replacement thought experiment, doesn't it?
Yes, the neural replacement scenario is basically legendary in philosophy. So Chalmers asked us to imagine taking a human brain and replacing just one single biological neuron with a tiny silicon chip that's programmed to perfectly mimic the electrical inputs and outputs of that exact neuron.
Okay, just one chip.
Right, then you replace another one and another, and over time your entire brain is replaced by silicon chips. Since the chips perfectly mimic the timing and signals of the biological neurons, Chalmers argued you would still act exactly the same. You would claim to be conscious, and you would feel no difference at all.
Meaning silicon can directly support human consciousness.
Exactly.
I mean, it sounds incredibly elegant on paper. But our authors, Pober and Schwitzgebel, actually agree with critics of this idea, right? Like philosophers Peter Godfrey Smith, Rosa Cow, and Ned Block. They all argue this one-to-one swapping experiment would fail catastrophically in reality. Why is that?
Because it fundamentally misunderstands the physical mechanics of a biological brain. A human neuron is not just a discrete digital wire sending a clean electrical pulse like a computer chip does. The biological brain is terrifyingly messy, it's continuous, and it's heavily analog.
Wait, analog? How so?
Well, a single neuron has tens of thousands of ion channels that react to physical chemical gradients. You have molecules like nitric oxide that don't travel along neat pathways. They act as a diffuse gas.
It's floating around.
Yeah, freely passing right through cell membranes to bathe whole regions of tissue in a continuous spatial way. You have complex blood flow dynamically delivering specific hormones.
Yep.
You have glial cells, which aren't even neurons. They're physically changing the environment around the neurons to modulate how they fire.
So a digital binary chip simply cannot replicate the analog, continuous, physical bathing of chemicals that actually drives brain function. It's like, okay, so it's like saying you need the exact iOS architecture to run a specific iPhone app, right? You can't just drop an iOS app into a Windows 95 computer and expect it to run. The underlying architecture of the hardware doesn't support the software's mechanisms.
Perfect analogy.
But, and this is the crucial distinction here, that does not mean you can't build a totally different operating system that still runs a highly functional calculator app.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, your operating system analogy perfectly captures the paper's argument. The critics are absolutely right that human-like consciousness requires human biology.
Because of all that messy chemical bathing.
Right. The specific messy flavor of our emotional and sensory experience is deeply tied to our analog chemical meat. But the authors argue that consciousness itself does not require human biology. Just because we can't cleanly turn a human brain into a silicon brain doesn't mean that an alien brain, naturally evolved from the ground up using silicon heteroatoms, couldn't possess its own completely valid non-human operating system of consciousness.
That makes total sense. We just keep projecting our specific iOS onto the rest of the universe, assuming it's the only way to process reality.
Exactly. Unmotivated terracentrism.
Okay, but this naturally leads us to the giant glowing AI elephant in the room. We cannot turn human brains into silicon chips. But what about minds built entirely out of silicon and code from scratch? What does this substrate flexibility mean for artificial intelligence?
Well, this raises a highly contentious question, and the source material takes a surprisingly funny twist right here. The two authors of this paper, Jeremy Pober and Eric Schwitzgebel, who have built this entire elegant argument together, fundamentally disagree with each other on the AI question.
They disagree on their own conclusion. That's amazing. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? I mean, think about the device you're listening to this on right now. We're interacting with highly sophisticated generative AI models every single day. How do the authors view the consciousness of the chips in our hands?
Let's break down their split decision. We'll start with author JMP Jeremy Pober. He argues that we should absolutely default to no on AI consciousness until proven otherwise.
Okay, why?
His reasoning is deeply grounded in the chemical mechanics we discussed earlier. Current computer chips do not utilize the chemical flexibility of life. They are rigid, discrete, and lack the dynamic, continuous interactions found even in the theoretical sulfuric acid aliens we imagine.
Right, they don't have that messy analog soup.
Exactly. Because current silicon architecture is so fundamentally severed from the chemical reality of biological life, he argues we shouldn't grant it the benefit of the doubt.
Essentially, he's saying the burden of proof is entirely on the AI because its physical substrate is just way too far outside the chemical realm of what we know can support life.
Right.
But the other author, ES, pushes back on that.
Yes, Eric Schwitzgebel takes the exact opposite stance. He argues that if we have already accepted substrate flexibility for aliens, if we agree that you don't need carbon and you don't need oxygen to have an inner life, then we shouldn't draw an arbitrary line in the sand just to exclude computer silicon.
Oh, wow.
Right. He says if an artificial substrate eventually supports the right level of behavioral sophistication, like if an AI demonstrates complex, adaptive goal-seeking, remote cooperation, and genuine generative grammar, we must be open to the possibility that an inner life has sparked inside it.
Because to say otherwise...
To definitively say it can't, he argues, is just slipping right back into that unmotivated terracentrism.
It is a fascinating philosophical standoff, and it really forces you to examine your own baseline biases, like, do we value the organic chemistry of life, or do we value the complexity of the behavior?
It's a tough call.
It really is. We have covered a massive amount of conceptual ground today. I mean, from realizing that a functional mechanism like a hard drive can't be made of cheese, to exploring the ionic realities of alien life swimming in sulfuric acid, to applying the Copernican Principle to the mind itself, realizing that our human experience is almost certainly not the center of the universe.
It is a profound shift in perspective, and it ultimately challenges us to expand our entire definition of what it actually means to exist as a feeling entity in this universe.
It really does. But before we go, there is one final staggering thought hidden in the conclusion of the paper that we absolutely need to share. Throughout this entire deep dive, we have been using a very high bar for behaviorally sophisticated, we're talking about technological species, aliens building spaceships, and communicating with complex grammar.
Right. That was the baseline for the 1,000 alien civilizations.
Exactly. But the authors pose a final question. What if we lower that bar? What if we lower it to the level of consciousness we see thriving all around us on Earth every single day?
Yeah.
Most biologists agree that all vertebrates, dogs, birds, fish possess consciousness. Cephalopods, like octopuses, are almost certainly conscious, highly intelligent creatures. And it's highly likely that many insects possess at least a basic foundational form of inner experience.
Right. They experience the world.
If we relax that standard of behavioral sophistication to just include that basic level of animal life, the mathematical estimates explode. The authors calculate that the number of qualifying planets in the observable universe jumps to a quintillion.
Wow.
A quintillion. That is a 1 followed by 18 zeros. 10 to the 18th power. I want you to just sit with that number for a second. A quintillion different planets where some strange alien substrate has sparked an inner mental life.
It's unfathomable.
A quintillion wildly different, bizarre forms of consciousness experiencing the universe in ways we literally do not have the biological architecture to comprehend. How deeply should that humble us? And perhaps more importantly, does recognizing this vast, bizarre landscape of alien consciousness change our moral responsibility right here at home? If we can philosophically value the inner life of a hypothetical creature swimming in sulfuric acid light years away, shouldn't that radically change how we treat the very real, very different non-human consciousnesses, the octopuses, the insects, the incredible wildlife that we share our own beautiful planet with today?
That is a powerful question to leave on.
The next time you look up at the night sky, you aren't just looking for water or carbon. You're looking at a canvas of a quintillion different minds, none of them needing to be exactly like yours to matter. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.